Welcome, fantabulous souls, to Psychically Speaking. I'm Psychic Lisa Ann, your host on this transformative journey of body, mind, and spirit. Join me, a psychic medium and healer, as we explore the wonders of life, share experiences, and grow together. Whether you're new to spirituality, an old soul, an empath, or a seasoned professional, this podcast has something special just for you. So let's dive in and embark on a journey of learning, healing, and personal growth together. Well, I am very excited to introduce you to yet another amazing guest, because let's be honest, I only have the most amazing people on Psychically Speaking with Lisa Ann. And I know those of you who have been following me for a very long time, you are going to love this next guest, because you may remember that back in the day, my dating life was always something between a Lifetime Movie Gone Really Bad and a comedy skit. So I wish I had known her back in the day. So today we are going to be talking to Courtney Carroll, who is a licensed marriage and family therapist. So let me bring her on. Hello, Courtney. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited.
So how do you like to introduce yourself? So I have licensed marriage and family therapist, but I know you do so much more than that. It seems like such a limiting title. So can you just give us a little bit of background about what you do?
Yeah, of course. Well, I don't really go by my titles. I'm Courtney. That's who my clients know me as. You have to have those credentials. So I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist in the state of North Carolina. I am trained, I went to school in Seattle, and I have my master's in counseling that focus on marriage and family. And then basically what I've been doing ever since is working in couples therapy and sex therapy. So those are probably my more well-known certifications, licenses, and what I do.
Love it. And that's why I wanted to have you on in the month of February, where we are on the theme of love, and not only relationships, but also self-love too, because I think that's an important place to start. So, since we are in this month of love, and right away people always think about relationships, I know we were talking before we went live, so to speak, but you were talking about happiness coming from within. And do you want to elaborate on that a little bit? Because I think before, when I was joking, before I brought you on, that my dating life used to be something between a comedy skit and a Lifetime movie gone really, really bad. And, when people ask me all the time, like, now I'm married and, I have a wonderful husband and we get along great. And like when people ask me what helps me to make that shift of all those years being in really bad relationships, there really is no magic secret. It really is, I had to learn to find my own happiness. So I love that thought, that belief system of happiness coming within. So do you want to elaborate on that a little bit?
I would love to. So this goes for any individual I see as well as couples, but like the number one question I get or comment or something I get in a couple session, it's new. And they're like, aren't they supposed to be what makes me happy? Aren't you like, you're supposed to be what makes me happy? And then I get to pause them and I say, well, they can contribute to your happiness for sure. They can add value to your life, but happiness as is yours to hold. No one
I
can
love
make
that.
you feel anything, right? No one can make you feel anything. And if I regard it, like if I counted on a partner to say, okay, my happiness relies on you, what happens if that relationship ends? And or later in life, as I've seen clients that have lost their partners, so we no longer happy. Are we never going to have happiness again? Or my couples that have gone through divorce, an individual gone through divorce, do we never get to be happy again? I'm like, oh gosh, guys, let's start with
And isn't
you. What
that
makes you
so much
happy?
pressure to put on someone, right? For
Yeah.
that person to feel like, oh my gosh, not only do I have to worry about myself and my daily responsibilities, but then that person's whole existence, their whole, being happy is depending upon me. I just feel like that's such a burden to put on someone else.
Exactly, a burden and pressure and stress, and what happens when we have burdens and stress? We probably fight, we argue, because no matter what, you're not gonna be good enough, it's not gonna land well, and because it was never their responsibility.
Right. So
Yeah.
how do you make people realize that? Because I think, especially nowadays, we live in a world. I laugh about this all the time because when I was miserable in life and struggling, whether it was relationships, money, whatever it was, I always felt like there were always all these people around sharing those feelings and emotions, right? But then I feel like once you work on yourself, I have this ongoing joke that the two things people like the least are happy people and honest people, right? So sometimes people don't like to hear that. So how do you make someone realize that their happiness does have to come within, right? And it's not that we're not saying that, maybe somebody did something that made you happy or made you mad. We're not saying that that's not the truth, but how do you make them see that they are responsible for their own happiness?
Okay. Well, I use a therapeutic approach, use
Yeah.
my words wisely, right? Emotion focused therapy. And emotion focused therapy is from Dr. Sue Johnson. She's incredible. And she's an attachment based theorist. So I go all the way back to how do we become who we are and what we need. And I immediately can almost see a pursuer and a withdrawer within 5 minutes of a session. And I go from like, well, of course, you guys aren't going to have the same needs, wants, happiness, unhappiness, because you're two different people. You both want something different.
So you just use the word a pursuer or a
A
withdrawer?
withdrawer.
Oh, I
Yes.
love, so is that just the main two types or?
That's the main two types. And basically what research has shown us is about 96% of couples are pursuers and withdrawers. The reason why pursuers aren't really together, they butt heads, they don't really get along, they fight and it blows up. Two withdrawers don't go past dating because they don't fight. They're like, okay,
Oh,
it's been a couple weeks. Oh, I'm gonna distance myself. I'm gonna distance myself. But what's so lovely about a pursuer and withdrawer is they complement each other and they find each other. Those needs that they didn't have when they're a kid, they usually find it in their partner. Like that withdrawer that shuts down in conflict, they have someone that they marry and fall in love with, a pursuer that will actually go get them. And
wow.
vice versa, the pursuer might have been thrown at like conflict, go, 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 and maybe having some abandonment issues or anything that can go on why they are the way they are. They have a withdrawer that's there that gives them peace, that is safe to shut down, pause, and give breaks that they never had or never felt like they could have.
Wow.
So, so it goes back to those fundamental things of what do we need and what brings us happiness. And that my job is to find out, okay, what are the core needs? And happiness comes from within, like I said. So we find out, hey, what do I need in a relationship to be happy? Withdrawers need quiet. They need a pause button. They need to be able to basically regulate their emotions. A pursuer needs to be told that they're not too much. They sometimes come across that they're attacking or they're needy or they push, push, push to get a reaction from their partner. And really, they just need to say, "You're not too much for me. You're perfect as you, and just like you need me to soothe you. You need to have that regulation. If you give a withdrawer some quiet time, they regulate. They can show up for their pursuer. They just can't do it right in that minute.
Okay,
And as
so
soon as the
what does the
pursuer realizes
withdrawer need?
a withdrawer needs to be told they're good enough, that that whatever they shut down for a reason, like nothing I do is good enough. So basically, it comes down to an attachment based approach. To give an idea, there's a negative cycle, and the withdrawer starts here. And in a conflict or anything, they can come out as frustrated or like they don't care because they're pulling away from their pursuer. They're shutting down, maybe stonewalling. That's a Gottman theory approach of a four horsemen. And then they're saying, well, I try. And then they're telling me I'm not good enough. So why do I freaking try anymore? Then they shut down. And then that's when sadness comes in. I call that a primary emotion. And under sadness is no matter what I do, even if I try and speak up to my partner, even if I try to say, hey, I'm here for you in this, and they're saying you're not doing it the right way, then I shut down. And the bottom line is they're not feeling attached, they're not feeling closeness, they're not feeling loved and supported by their partner. And on the flip side, like the pursuers come across like they're attacking their partner. There you go, go, go. They won't stop because they need to be heard. They need to be heard so bad because they love their partner so much. Now, if only they would just know, I'm doing this to save our marriage. I'm doing this to save our relationship, you know? And then they go down and it's like, my partner just doesn't see that this is how I show up. This is how like, they see I'm not giving up. And then they feel hurt. Then they feel sad because their withdrawal is shut down. And then they've tried pursued. They're not going anywhere. And all of a sudden they feel abandoned. And the
Now,
abandonment
do the
leads.
pursuer and the withdrawers, do they always play those same roles, or can those roles shift throughout the relationship or in times of challenges or different circumstances? Or is that the core? If is a pursuer always a pursuer and a withdrawer always a withdrawer, or does that change throughout their
It can change.
experiences?
It can change from relationship to relationship, but if someone's together, let's say 10 years, it's probably pretty consistent,
Mhm,
that they don't really switch roles. However, in a sexual cycle, they can easily switch cycles.
mhm, okay,
An emotional withdrawer can be a sexual pursuer
mhm,
because that could maybe be how they pursue their partner. And an emotional pursuer that can communicate very well, maybe they shut down in sex. So I have
mhm.
seen the roles fix in that, but I've also seen when a relationship terminate that maybe like, hey, I don't want to be that shutdown person. I'm going to learn how to pursue, and they switch in their next relationship. And very rarely I've seen them switch throughout it.
Mm.
But the core attachment issues, like the abandonment and not being good enough, those usually stay pretty consistent with the work I've done so far.
I'm just picturing in my mind people that are listening to this right now going, "Oh my God, I'm a pursuer. Oh my God, I'm a withdrawer," right? Because you see yourself in these moments. So, what is the best advice that you have for someone who's a pursuer and the best advice for someone who's a withdrawer?
Oh, that's a really good question. So the best thing I could suggest to a pursuer is trying to let their partner use a pause button for that withdrawal. However, I would make sure that withdrawer then make sure they follow up with that pursuer. So let's say it's a high escalated fight, or maybe they're just having a bad day and they come home from work and they're feeling overwhelmed. Overwhelm's a big emotion. And they say to their partner, hey, I just need a minute. And the pursuer's like, hey, I haven't seen you all day. I want to do it right now. Like, let's talk now. Instead, I'd say, like, hey, do you mind if we eat some dinner, maybe put the kids to bed, and then revisit it? The pause button, a lot of pursuers don't like. A lot of people don't like in general. Like, they're like, hey, no, my needs are important right now.
I
And,
love
and
this. Yeah,
And
this is great
in
advice because especially I think we're living in a world of overwhelm. I think just from all the years I've been working with people, I think overwhelm is the biggest word that I hear of late. And I'm sure
Mhm,
you see that too. And then that's what happens. Like I always tease people and say, like, don't let life get in the way, right? So that feeling of
mhm,
overwhelm is a perfect example of that, where we just get to that point where we're just so overwhelmed by life.
mhm.
So that makes a lot of
Y
sense.
Yeah, and what do I do with that? So that
Mhm.
pursuer drop like, it's can we implement a pause button? Can we come back to this in a little bit? And a pursuer probably just needs to be maybe hugged and told them like, "Hey, I
Mhm.
love you.
Right.
This isn't about you. I had maybe an off day at work, a long day at work. Can we meet in a little bit? Or if we need a pause button in high conflict, let's set the timer. Let's come back in 30 minutes. And if
So
it's
it
after
really is
9
about the
p.m., go go
no,
ahead.
so it really is about the communication.
Absolutely.
Mhm,
Oh, often couples can never communicate enough,
mhm. And
what
what do
they
you
think.
think, like, what is a key or what is a tip, we're talking about relationships, and I think sometimes too, we're talking about, um, those personal relationships, right? Dating life, married
Yeah.
life. But I think a lot of times these tips can be used in all kinds of relationships, right?
Mhm,
Relationships with family members and coworkers and friends,
mhm.
because I think a lot of those rules apply. But how do you really, or what is your tip for people who really need to like understand their partner, right? Because I think once you kind of have that epiphany, like I did way back in the day, that, hey, I have to be responsible for my own happiness. If I'm with someone who constantly stands me up, doesn't call when they're supposed to, if I'm still staying with them after 17, being stood up, then that's on me. Not them, right? So once I had that epiphany, like, okay, my happiness has to come from with me and feeling that
Mhm.
value, right? Then I think now you're ready for a relationship. But what are the best tips for really understanding your partner, especially like what you're talking about? This is amazing. And I have to tell you, this is the first time I'm hearing those terms of that withdrawer, and I love it. I love it. So what's a tip for once you realize which one you are, right? How can
Mhm.
you better understand your partner? Right? Especially if you're the one that
Yeah.
wants, if somebody wants to understand they're the pursuer and their partner's a withdrawer, how do you get to know them better? Or how do you understand them better and figure out what they need?
You ask them, "Hey, you identify with a withdrawer. Why do you think you identify with a withdrawer?" And then, let's say I identify, I'm a withdrawer. I tell all my clients I'm a withdrawer. And when you break it down, and I'm a pursuer in work, my clients, I will call you, I will hunt you down. But when I am in my marriage and in my relationship, high conflict, I can shut down. That's it. Because
Mhm.
this is way too big of an important relationship. It's a different attachment. I
Mhm.
base when you find your partner, it's the same attachment as you have with your parents. So where do we learn our attachment? Where do we learn? Where did I become a withdrawer? Well, I
Right.
learned as a child of 6 that shutting down and being quiet, I didn't get in trouble. The eyes weren't on me, and it became safer. Not arguing back, not speaking out my mind. That's how I survived. And my parents are great, but that's how I got through and how I learned how to get love, get
Right.
affection, to, if I'm quiet, I don't cause problems. Oh, Courtney's the good kid. She doesn't do that. And so it was then reaffirmed. And so now I get to tell my partner, hey, I withdraw because when I was a kid, I never really felt like I could speak up. And now my partner has a key into why I shut down. I'm not shutting down because I don't love them. I'm shutting down because that's what I know to do. That's also when I shut down, I'm trying to keep peace. I'm not trying to shut them up. I'm not trying to tell them they don't matter. I'm going to what I know to my core to be true from how I survived and how I went through as a kid, teenager, young adult in a close attachment base.
I love that.
Um,
Yeah. So it's really about really letting the walls down, right?
yes,
And help. So I think that part of this is really helping your partner to understand you.
you. And if you don't know you, if you don't know why you're the way you are, how does your partner?
Mhm.
How do they know? And what I've seen and is if I know why someone feels the way they do, it's so much easier to show up for them. If I shut down, if I do this and my partner thinks, "Oh, my voice went up. No wonder why Courtney shut down." And as soon as you can meet them in that, like, "Oh, I know you're not shutting down. I know you're just overwhelmed, right? I know,
Mhm.
what can I do in this moment? Like, can you give me 5 minutes? I'll calm down and I'll come back to the table." In the past, in my relationship prior, I would have said, if we could keep our voices into a certain vocal range, I can stay here and I can be here all night. As soon as you go up, I want to shut down, and it's really triggering to me. And
Right.
my partner would have told me as a pursuer, when you walk away, when you shut down, you abandon me. You know, my partner's parents have had issues where he was abandoned. That's a
Mhm.
huge thing. And if I know when I walk away that I abandoned my partner, chances are I won't do it again.
That it's very funny because I know when Kyle, my husband, and I met, we both of us had this line, right? Like, we would say it jokingly, right? I would say every time we were kidding about something, I would, make a comment about something. And then he would jokingly say to me, "Oh, well, that's because you're crazy," or something like that, right? And it would immediately like just trigger the other person, right? And I remember one day we were just joking around about something, but he said the comment that set me off. I said the comment that would set him off. And I remember both of us like realizing in that moment that, and it wasn't, we weren't saying anything horrible to each other. It was something that if somebody was listening from the outside in, it sounded like a funny joke. But because of past experiences, it was our thing, right? It was my thing, it was his thing. So we had an agreement from that day, like you could say whatever you want except those two. I couldn't say that thing to him and he couldn't say that thing to me, because those were the things that just set us off, right? Because it just
Mhm.
brought back too many things from bad past experiences or bad past relationships. So I think that's so important because sometimes, you could think, oh, I'm just joking about something, right? But it's what's the significance to that person on the receiving end of the joke, right? So I think
Yeah.
there's work, relationships are work. And I think that's one thing that I wanted to ask you about because I laugh about this all the time. Everybody is always looking for their soulmate, which I always have an issue with because a soulmate is not just a romantic relationship, right? It's Hollywood creation. And
Mhm.
everybody's always thinking, and this is very interesting. People always think there's like this, fireworks and, their eyes meet across a room. And I have to tell you now that I've been, 56 years on this earth, right? I have found that the long-term couples that really stay together and work together and really have that like respectful connection, very often that's not the first experience. There's not this fireworks and all this craziness. And I think that's so important because people are expecting something that's not always reality. So can you talk about that a little bit?
I think I break couples' hearts all the time in that first session when I tell them I don't believe in soulmates. And that's probably and I warn them every time. I'm like, I don't believe in soulmates. I don't think there's one person meant for us. And are you committed? Are you willing to make choices? And are you willing to invest, whether that's financially or time, into this relationship to make it work?
Right, and
And
I
that's
know people are like, "What?" But
I
I
know.
agree with you. I believe that a soulmate is specifically a soul that if you believe in past lives that we've been with before. I do not
Mhm.
believe that a soulmate is specifically a relationship connection and there's only one person that's right for us. I believe we have many, many soulmates that we come in contact with. They can be a coworker, a friend, a child. And yes, they can be a romantic relationship, but that's not all they are. So I 100% agree with you. And I think it's so important because I think sometimes people use that as an excuse to stay in a bad relationship, right? Oh, it's my soulmate. Well, if I walked up to you every day and punched you in the face, at some point you're going to be like, that's not really acceptable behavior. And I don't care if you're my soulmate. So I do
Mhm.
think it's important to address that because I think it keeps people stuck way too often.
Yeah, and TV, Disney, what we grew up on, they sell this, and they're like, "Where's
Yes.
that sparkle? Where's that lust? Where's those other things?" Like, "It's gone, Courtney, does what does that mean?" And then that's where I kinda start the work. I'm like, "Okay, how did it start? How'd you meet? How'd you fall in love? Where did it stop? When did we stop investing in this? When did we stop investing into ourselves?" Because that's also a detriment to marriage in
Hmm.
any partnership with anyone. Is when did I stop taking care of myself in this relationship? And maybe I found my identity in this relationship or with this person. I lost myself. And you kind of have to reacquaint and get to know that person to find out what they like, what they want. And then you bring it together. And then we're like, okay, now that you kind of know what you want, how do we build this? And we go,
Right.
and
It's
that's how
right.
we kind
Because
of get
when you
going.
take care of yourself, you have so much more to give to the other person, right? And I think too many
Mhm.
times it's two broken people coming together. Oh my God, this is where everybody's going to turn me off, but I really don't care because I cannot stand that you complete me. That drives me crazy. I don't even remember what movie that was from in my day and age, but you complete me. Oh my God. Every time I would hear that, I would lose my mind. Right. And I always
Mhm.
tell people, no, you have to complete yourself. That's not being selfish. That's not being egotistical. When you complete yourself and that person completes themselves, now you come together and you both add to each other's lives. You're not trying to rescue each other. You're not saving each other. You have so much more to bring to the table.
Absolutely. And not and just to touch on the rescue and save each other, that doesn't mean they can't in certain aspects in life. You know,
Right.
there's some couples that have been in distress and then gosh, someone dies, someone goes to hospital, they miraculously can show up for each other.
Right.
And it can be incredible, right? And it's always surprising when that can happen. And then I use that. I'm like, how do we do that here and do and apply it everywhere else?
Mhm.
Right.
And
But
I
it
just,
is like
whenever I'm talking to someone, I'm always thinking, like, as somebody is listening, I know someone's listening right now going, my relationship really needs help. And how do I get that person to go to counseling? I get that all the time. So,
yeah.
what is your advice for that? You have one half of the partnership that wants to go to counseling, wants to fix the relationship. The other one says they want to fix the relationship, but are they willing to go to counseling? They're not sure. How do you handle something like that?
I see this happening in two ways. I will then ask that said partner, when have you gone to therapy? What are you doing? And why are they wanting what keeps them away from therapy? And if they said, "Oh no, I haven't gone to therapy," and I was like, "So let's start with you. One person can change a relationship." I would bet my license on it. If you really dive into yourself and you're committed and you go do the work, your partner's going to notice and be like, "Hey, what's going on there? What's going on with that?" And so if they're unwilling, you do the work. You go figure out what's going on with you. What's going on in my marriage that I'm contributing to, and then your partner could then see it. Maybe your partner is scared you have done therapy before, or maybe they've done couples work before. And I'm always curious on what kind of couples work that is.
Mhm.
Being from the South, a lot of people will do some church priests, anything like that. Sometimes they do some of that type of counseling, but that might not, it might have been a couple weeks. It's not
Right.
investing a lot of time in. So, and maybe they think I'm going to be just like that experience or whatever thought process they have. And I'm like, let's get them on a phone consult. A lot of therapists do free phone consults. I know I do. And I talk to them and I'm like, what's keeping us away? And
Right.
what are you willing to invest for this to change? And I start with a 90-minute session. That's what I prefer for couples work. It's two people, 50 minutes doesn't do the job. And then we go from there and seeing like, did they find value in it? And I tell people all the time, no therapist is a perfect match for everyone. And I
Right.
wish someone told me that a long time ago.
That's why I love
And
you, because we have so many of the same philosophies, right? I always tell people when they come for, sessions with me and I say, I really think that you need to go to couples counseling. And they'll say, oh,
Mhm,
that person doesn't want to go. That is exactly what I say all the time. Then you need to go. Not because, it's all your fault. It has nothing to do with that.
mhm,
Or even, just in healing work, right? People come and
mhm,
they say, oh, I've taken this healing certification or I've done this and, it's changed my life. How do I get my sister, my husband, my brother, whoever, right? How do I get my friend? And I always tell people, you just be who you are, right? Because people will absolutely notice the change and you can't fix someone else. You can just be the example. You can just focus on yourself and allow others to see that positive outcome. So I think that's so valuable. So
There
valuable.
there's this quote that I always to my clients would laugh at me if they heard this, or I say I'm gonna tattoo it on my arm, and it says, "Your actions speak so loud I can hardly hear you.
I
Be the
love that.
actions. Be the actions." And I said, "So if it's just one person, show them." And
That's a
then
great saying. Say that again.
"Your actions speak so loud I can hardly hear you."
I love
And it
that.
has stayed with me since I was in high school when I heard it. And I'm like, "That makes so much sense." Our
That's a
actions
great
will always
saying.
speak for us. And I tell again, that's mostly what I tell any client, not just a couple. I was like, what are your actions saying? You can tell someone you love them all the time. And that
Right.
doesn't mean what you're doing and say like they're not aligning. And what are we willing to invest in action? Do that. And if what like you said, what happens when one person comes together, you do the work. And then
And you
if
also
they don't
work with people who are like trying to get in good relationships, right? Like you work with singles, not only couples, but you also work
Yes.
with people that, want to experience a better relationship, or maybe they were a
Yeah.
former me who had disastrous dating lives, right? So you
Oh,
work with those people as well.
absolutely. And those are probably like what I felt the last year to be called to reach out to and be part of that community as well. It is hard to leave a bad relationship and go, what happens now? And that's again, that's happiness comes from you. What do you want? What are you doing
Right.
right now to say that that's what you want? If you want a good husband, wife, you're like maybe you want someone that speaks like your love language. My partner never gave me words of affirmation, but he'd always give me touch. What does words of affirmation mean? What are you like? How do you value it? What are you doing for yourself to get that?
I love
And
that.
then going from there, and then dating, putting yourself out there. It's such a different world in just 5 years versus 10 years versus 20.
Oh my
And I
gosh,
have
it really
men
is.
and and I have single men and women from probably 25, and I think my oldest is like 67, and they're get back on the dating scene, and it's okay. Let's get back out there, but first, let's do some healing. Let's work through what happened, and when you work through that process, what's happened, then I'm like, okay, what do you want? And then
Right.
not settling for anything less. Creating boundaries right off the bat. I love your story about you and Kyle, and I'm not surprised because I know you guys. Like you know my weakness. Don't you dare use it against me. And that's a
Right. Right.
boundary. That's a boundary. And people always think boundaries are bad. Boundaries are healthy, and they're like a good fence around a house. There's protection. You have them, the house is safe.
Yeah,
And
I agree. You have to have boundaries. You really do. I mean, you have to. It's so funny because when I look back, it just seems so obvious what all my issues were, right? When I was having those bad relationships, it's so clear to me I didn't have any boundaries. I wasn't feeling deserving. So I was always trying to be that person. Let me prove to this person, what a good girlfriend I could be. Let me do this. And when I finally like had my aha moment and went, oh my God, like everything that I'm doing, I'm like the nurse, the therapist, the doctor, the rah rah cheerleader. Like it was always something that I was doing for that person, but there was nowhere in there where I was like defining my own value. So I think that's
Mhm.
such an important part. Like we're gonna have you back on just to do a whole thing about going from single to happy relationship, because I think that's a whole another area for discussion. So let's
Absolutely.
just jump for a minute because we are in February and Valentine's Day.
Yes.
So what kind of tips do you have for those that are in relationships, who've been in relationships for a little while and the day-to-day world just kind of gets in the way, for just kind of spicing things up,
Okay. I love that question. I
getting
like when
back to
things are
that
spiced up.
reconnection?
Reconnection. A lot of people do not talk about sex. And I think what can we do to bring something more spicy and fun to that relationship? And Valentine's Day, the last couple weeks, maybe a lot of couples and sex therapists are talking about it, but I know I am this week. I'm checking in with all my couples and individuals. Hey, how do you celebrate? What are you doing? Do you do
Mm-hmm.
anything? My women clients are really loving the idea of finding lingerie. It's like a coat of armor, and that's how they want to kind of show up and be brave and put themselves out there to initiate. Maybe they don't always initiate. I have male clients that are like, "Hey, what is romantic?" And I'm like, "Okay, what does your partner love?" And that goes into a lot of things, but I think the biggest one is like, um, have you made like it doesn't have to be a big expense. Valentine's Day is not
Right.
supposed to be super expensive. It's not. I know Hallmark sells it, but what
Yeah.
about just lighting some candles and playing some music, dancing with your wife or your girlfriend or your boyfriend in the kitchen, or if you are going to be intimate, creating it to be a little bit more romantic and intimate, or creating more intimacy, I guess is a better word for it. And I'm like, do you have a playlist? So many couples do not listen to music and sex. And I'm like, why? One, it's
Right.
really great for anyone with anxiety to have a
Right.
distraction. And I always say, tap into those five senses: music, ears, listening. If you can hear every other noise. And I always suggest, I love on if you have Apple Music, the Bridgerton playlists or any of the 50 Shades of Grey soundtracks. Those are like put on some music, light some candles, and create some ambiance. And if
Love
the
it.
partner is wearing something special to wear that night, that's great.
Mhm.
And some couples, if let's say go back to five love languages, if it's words of affirmation, you don't need to go buy a $10 card. You can write a note and say, Happy Valentine's Day. You're the love of my life. I'm so glad to be here. And it's worth 1,000 roses.
I
It's
love
just kind of
that.
fun.
And as we
Yeah.
wrap up, do you want, I know I talk about the love languages, the five love languages all the time. I believe that when you come out of the birth canal, you should be handed a copy. And I was so excited because a couple of years ago, I was telling a client about it, and I said they were having an issue. They owned a business, and I said, "Listen, it really was written for relationships, but it could be used in all areas of life." So imagine how excited I was when I went to look it up, and I found out that there are now the five love languages for work and for teenagers and for singles. And so do you want to talk a little bit and just let people know that aren't familiar with it, the concept of it?
Yeah, of course. Well, it's a very popular concept, and basically, Gary Chapman. I just wanted to make sure I got his name right. Gary Chapman created this years ago. I actually heard about this growing up. My parents made us all take this quiz to find out how they could love and show up better as a parents, and I think that's huge.
Oh,
Recommend
I
all parents to
love
do
that.
that and have your kids, teenagers take the test so they can find out. So then the parent can find out how they can love their kid the way they need to be loved. So if you're single, that's a great way to still do that and celebrate and learn your kids better. Um, and then the love languages, just briefly, because we could talk about that all day, is acts of service, touch. Sorry, I'm writing them down. And just acts of service, touch, gift giving. Goodness, why am I drawing a
I'm
blank?
spent because that's
Time
mine.
spent, quality time. Okay. And basically, what I do, a couple, I always assign, hey, go take this. And I kind of tease. I love the book. I love the concept. It is trained, especially if you're a military spouse or partner. Like all the Chapman retreat, like this is probably what's taught. And it's
Mhm.
also probably over taught in some situations. But I always say, why? Why do you want to be loved that way? Where
Mhm.
did you learn that? And teach it to your partner. That's the only
I
missing
love
piece, I
that.
think, is.
Yeah, and
So
for
if a couple
anybody
can take
listening,
that.
you could actually just Google the five love languages and you'll find it. And there's a little online quiz that you could take. And again, those five love languages are acts of service. So like taking out the garbage, cleaning the sink, time spent. There's the physical touch, giving someone a hug or giving someone, holding someone's hand. There's affirmation. So telling someone that you love them, and then gifts, like buying physical gifts. And I will tell you what's funny, because when Kyle and I first started dating, Kyle's very techy, as those of you who know us know, and he's got a gadget for everything. So when we first met, he was always buying all these little things, all these gadgets. I am not a gadget person. I prefer, like in the kitchen, a fork. It works for everything. I don't need a separate. So he was always buying these little gadgets. And I'd come from work and I'd be like, I've been at work for 12 hours today. Why are there still dishes in the sink? Right? Because I'm an acts of service. And it's
Mhm.
funny because I could see how like someone can start to feel unappreciated because he's like, oh my God, I thought I bought this gift for you to use for your computer. And here it is on the table. And I didn't even notice it because I was like, why are the dishes piled so high? Right. So again, it's like, as you get to know each other in that relationship, it's so important because that's the way people express their love for you. And the one thing that I think is funny is I think sometimes there's a misconception that people are going to find out what their love language is so that the other person has to change who they are. And that's not what this is about, right? It doesn't mean,
Mm-mm.
hey, I'm an act of service, so now you only have to do services. It's about meeting in the middle.
Absolutely, and learning. And from what and I'm not saying this for Kyle because I really want to know, you probably have to let me know. Sometimes we show the love language that we want, you know?
Right.
Gift giving is my love language, and I had to really process that and relearn that and learn why I'm that way. And I remember thinking, am I this materialistic person? I was like, nope, rewind. Where did you
Right.
get rewarded with love? Oh, gifts. That's how my, and
Yeah.
and then you kind of show, hey, partner, hey, girlfriend, boyfriend, I know we just took this test, but this is how I like to be loved. How do you like to be loved? And I no longer can't necessarily always do the way because I love giving gifts. Anyone that knows me personally knows that. And I have to like, oh, words of affirmation is yours. And I have to take that in and be like, and apply it and
Right.
share that
And
with them
I
too.
love that. Yeah. It's about understanding each other and applying what you learn about each other. I
Yeah.
love that.
Yeah. Doing
So
both.
as we wrap up,
Mhm.
what's one thing that you think is really important? Like anybody who's listening to this today, what is one of the most important things that you would like them to take with them from this podcast today?
It's investing in yourself. It's reminding yourself your happiness comes from within. And if you can do that, you can have a great relationship. If you can find out, like, hey, this comes from me, work on that, and then bring it into your couple, bring it into your relationships, you are going to find that the most rewarding relationship there are is when you're aligned and you don't have to rely on anyone else but yourself. And then know that everyone else just complements it, aligns with it, and you can grow with it. And I think it's really important to know. And it's hard work and it's hard to realize that all by yourself or it's really all of me. And it's like, no, you do your part, your partner does their part. And how do you then invest together?
Right. And I think that's so important. I love that you keep addressing that because it is work. And I think sometimes people think, oh, if I have to put work in it, this must not be the right relationship because it's supposed to be this Hollywood version of perfection that doesn't exist. Right.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
I always ask everybody this, what do you love most about what you do?
Oh gosh. I love what I do. I feel so honored and privileged. It brings tears into my eyes on what I get to do for work. I love seeing change. I love seeing someone heal from trauma, heal from love. A couple that maybe have not been intimate in 5, 10 years have sex again. I've been honored to be on IVF journeys and watch someone bring a baby into this world and basically watch lives transform because they're committed and they do the work
I
and it
love
pays
it.
off. It's
I
it's an
love it.
honor. It's an honor to
Right.
be doing what I do.
And I love as you're talking about challenging times, and I ask all my guests this because I think it's so important. Because, we say on Psychically Speaking with Lisa Ann, because life is not always rainbows and butterflies, right? So I always love to
Mhm.
ask my guests, what keeps you going during challenging times?
What keeps me going through challenging times? That's a hard question. I'm going to say I have a beautiful daughter. She's always a testament of me pushing and persevering. But also, I deserve this. I deserve love. I deserve to be here and I deserve to get what I want out of life. And that's what it's about. Like, what is life? It's supposed to be full of beautiful adventures and joy and laughter, but also doing the work to do it.
I love
I
it.
hope that answers.
Oh my God, yeah, it makes so much sense. Thank you so much. I know this is just going to help so many people. And I wish I knew you way back in the day. It could have saved me a lot of boxes of
Me
tissues.
too.
So, if somebody is listening to this and they would like to work with you, because I know that they don't only have to be in person. So, if
Mhm.
somebody has questions or they want to reach out to you, we encourage them to do that. So, what is the best way for someone to get in touch with you?
The best way to get a hold of me is probably by phone call. You can call and leave me a voicemail, text message to schedule an appointment at 910-585-6253, or get a hold of me at C Carol Waymark Counseling at proton.me. That's CCARROLLWAYMARK counseling at proton.me. I am currently working and developing a new Instagram account. It's called Let's Talk About It. And I'm happy to
Love it.
provide that information to you so you can attach it. But those are the easiest
Perfect.
ways to get a hold of me. And I do want to specify for therapy, it does have to be in the state of North Carolina.
Okay. Right. Very good. Well, thank you very much for making time for us today. And like I said, I know this is going to help a lot of people, and I'm sure that we are going to have you back again. So thank you very
Thank you.
much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for joining me on this incredible journey. If you enjoyed the podcast, please share it with a friend and hit subscribe. For more about my free live weekly happy hour via Zoom, my work, or visiting my Body, Mind, Spirit spa and gift shop in historic downtown Southern Pines, North Carolina, visit spiritquestnc.com. Remember, life isn't always rainbows and butterflies, but each and every day you have the power to be fantabulous. Embrace that power. Let your inner light shine. Until next time, stay empowered and keep embracing life's magic.